The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. O. Henry was an American short story writer. His stories expressed humor, coincidence, irony, and had surprise endings. He produced a story a week for the New York Sunday World magazine and also wrote for other magazines. His works include Cabbages and Kings, The Rolling Stone, and The 4 Million, which also contained the widely popular story The Gift of the Magi. Della sat in her house, confused and sad. She counted her money. $1.87, 60 cents of it in pennies, which Della had saved bargaining with the grocer, the vegetable man, and the butcher, although she felt embarrassed. 3 times Della counted the money, as the next day was Christmas, and she had to buy her husband a present. Della could do nothing, so she sat down and cried, which makes us think that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Her home was a furnished apartment at $8 per week. The entrance hall had a letter box with no letters in it, and a doorbell that no longer worked. Under the doorbell, there was a card named Mr. James Dillingham Young. But when James came home, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by his wife. Della finished crying and dabbed her cheeks with a powder rag. She looked out of the window dully. She had been saving every penny for months, but their income was $20 a week, which didn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. She had only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, whom she loved dearly and had spent her time planning for something nice which he deserved. There was a mirror between the windows that was of a size that only an agile person could see his reflection, that too by moving back and forth. Della stood before the mirror. Her eyes shone brilliantly, but her face lost its colors in seconds. She pulled down her hair that fell to its full length. There were 2 possessions the Dillingham Youngs were proud of: Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and grandfather's, and Della's hair. Della's beautiful hair shone like a cascade of brown waters, reaching below her knee, almost like a garment. She did it up again nervously and quickly, stumbling for a moment. She stood still as a tear or 2 splashed on the worn red carpet. She put on her brown jacket and old brown hat, and then barged out of the door. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. Della asked the madame if she would buy her hair. The madame said yes and asked Della to remove her hat so she could see her hair. She offered $20 for the hair. Della agreed and asked to pay her quickly. With the money, she ransacked the store for Jim's present and finally found it, one that was surely made for him. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and elegant in design, perfect for Jim's gold watch. The chain was like Jim, quiet and valuable. She bought it for $21 and hurried home with 87 cents. Now, Jim wouldn't have to look at his watch secretly, like he did, because of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. Della got back home and took her curling irons to repair the damage to her hair. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny curly hair that made her look like a truant schoolboy. She observed herself in the mirror. Della thought how Jim would say she looked like a chorus girl. But what could she do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and Della was ready to cook. Jim was never late. Della held the fob chain and waited by the door. Then she heard his steps and turned white for a moment, praying to God that Jim would think of her as pretty. Jim stepped in, looking all thin and very serious. Poor Jim was only 22, burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and was without gloves. He saw Della with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went to him. She started convincing him not to look at her that way, as she had cut her hair and sold it, because she couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving him a present. She asked him whether he won't mind it, and then assured him that her hair will grow awfully fast. She then greeted him a Merry Christmas and suggested that they be happy, as he didn't know what a beautiful, nice gift she had gotten for him. Jim was still having difficulty grasping the fact that Della had cut her hair. Della asked him whether he doesn't like her without her hair. Jim still began looking around the room curiously. But Della told him that her hair would not be found in the house, as she had sold it off. Maybe her hairs were numbered, but nobody could ever count her love for Jim. Then Della asked Jim if she should put the chops on. Jim came out of his trance and quickly put his arms around her. Then he drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. He told Della how there isn't any haircut in the world that would make him like Della any less. But if she unwraps the package he had brought for her, then she would know why Jim was a bit taken aback at first. Della unwrapped the package with nimble hands. When she saw what was inside, she let out a scream of joy, which quickly changed to hysterical tears and wails as Jim comforted her. There lay the combs, the set that Della had seen in a shop window and wanted ever since. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell, jeweled rims. Just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. She knew they were expensive and had never expected to own them. But now she owned the comb only to have lost her tresses. Della still held it to her bosom and told Jim that her hair grows very fast. But then she realized that Jim hadn't seen his present, so she excitedly held the present before him. The dull, precious metal of the fob chain flashed with her bright spirit. Della told Jim how she had hunted down stores to find it for him, and that he could look at the time 100 times a day from then onwards. She then eagerly asked him to show his watch. Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. He told Della that they should put their Christmas presents away for a while, as they were too nice to use at that moment. He had sold his watch to buy her combs with that money. He then asked her to put the chops on so they could eat dinner. The Magi were the wonderful wise men who brought gifts to the baby Jesus, thus inventing the tradition of giving Christmas presents. Their gifts were wise ones like them, just like the two foolish people who unwisely sacrificed their greatest treasures for each other. But of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. They are wise everywhere. They are the Magi.